If you've been on Twitter, or unfortunately play League of Legends like me, you may have heard of Seraphine. This controversial character has garnered a lot of attention, and I'll be digging into how she became one of the most notoriously hated characters. Hi, I'm Liv, and I want to share my perspective as a girl who actually plays this stupid game.
There's a part of myself I'm missing. Now I got a lot to learn.
So who is Seraphine? Well, it wasn't immediately apparent that she was created to be a League of Legends champion. People quickly figured it out and spread the news. I followed her when she only had like 300 followers and had not yet been confirmed to have any relation to League of Legends. Her Twitter was just her retweeting art and what we'll categorize as relatable posts. This was the first time League's parent company, Riot Games, had ventured into this kind of project. A Twitter account filled with professionally made art and in-character posts for an unreleased champion? So what is she? Reality or fiction? As Seraphine's page grew a following and she began to make her own relatable posts, many began to claim that the posts were inauthentic. What the hell is being authentic, though? Being real and genuine is important to most people, but how do we apply that to fictional characters? When writing fiction, the sky's the limit, but some subjects require real-life experience to tackle effectively. Write what you know. Of course, it's important for writers to figure out whether their characters are believable or not. Create a believable universe and believable characters, and you can write whatever stories you want, so long as you put the thought into how that fiction will be consumed in the context of the real world. If it's meant to be escapism, then any cultural issues tackled need to be tackled in a satisfying way, or it just feels like the consumer's reliving their bullshit reality. The question right now is, was Seraphine written well? The general consensus would absolutely be no. Why though? Generally, there are 3 big reasons why people hate Seraphine right now. Marketing. At Sarah.wave, the Twitter page, and Riot Games' attempt to sell a product. The fumbled product. Seraphine's League of Legends release being accompanied by 3 whole cosmetic skins. The lore. Her Twitter persona versus her in-game persona. In order to understand these 3 overarching criticisms, we have to start at the beginning. Among all the bullshit that 2020 has had to offer, virtual YouTubers have been a fun, cute, goofy addition to internet culture. Virtual YouTubers, or VTubers, are content creators that stream or upload videos featuring a virtual avatar, usually a 2D or 3D animated rig. There are many independent VTubers that have popped up, but the most popular and most successful right now are under the agency Hololive. Access to this company gives them connections with other popular VTubers as well as free marketing. This gives them an automatic leg up over any independent creator who exists as a VTuber. Not to mention that they're able to have high-quality model rigs without necessarily needing a matching artistic ability. Many of these VTubers play a character, making the practice a fun limbo between fiction and reality. The same can be said about a lot of virtual bands, like the Gorillaz, Studio Killers, League of Legends' very own KDA, True Damage, Pentakill, Vocaloid. Hell, I've been to a Vocaloid concert. I don't regret it. We are vibing. This is from Miku Expo. I went live to see some f***ing holograms. All of these virtual bands have a dedicated group of people working on them, but are centered around the fictional characters that make up the visual part of the band. Most Gorillaz videos feature the animated characters in a live-action videotape setting, often alongside real people. Studio Killers' videos typically feature Cherry, the fictional lead singer of the band, in different narratives that each video is designed to illustrate in tandem. Most relevant to the topic are Riot Games' multiple music projects, with their 3 separate virtual bands at the helm. League of Legends is a multiplayer online battle arena, where each game takes place on a set arena with the same amount of players. 5 people on each team. The game is more competitive than story-driven, but that doesn't mean its lore hasn't been expanded since its release. With added game modes, a fully fledged card game, and other expansions into Riot's world of Runeterra, League of Legends' shared universe has become more and more worth paying attention to.
So, I hope Ted's actually here.
I have terribleness.
Oh. Hey, Liv. We got
What's up? We can do this.
this. Nice.
Oh, crikey, mate. I made a mistake, I made a mistake, I made a mistake.
Wait!
I was like watching a puppy get kicked.
It really was.
Ow! Riot Games has started using the skins that they released to expand their characters into a narrative, beyond that of the game's original story. Each cosmetic comes with a narrative that exists in an alternate universe, giving the design team the freedom to come up with just about anything. Well, anything that the company execs find to be marketable enough. True Damage and KDA especially walk an interesting line between fiction and reality, with each skin line written as if they took place in our reality rather than another fictional universe. KDA explored this briefly upon release, posting an interview with the members as a short story on the League website and being a huge part of the 2018 League World Championships. The professional singers that provided the singing voices for the 4 KDA members performed the song and choreography live. Pop stars showed how much potential there was in dedicating that much time and money into a skin line. After that huge success, it was obvious to Riot that they could push the hell out of True Damage, their true pioneer, into virtual reality. Jason Chan, senior concept artist at Riot Games, created a collection of art depicting the members of True Damage in less posed settings, like candid photos. These pictures were posted to the League Facebook and Instagram, and mostly showed them traveling to Paris on a private jet to perform for the 2019 World Championships. Releasing a music-based champion to fit into the next huge KDA release was just the next step. All of these are works of fiction that are connected to a product. Musicians want to sell you an album, even if they're able to put a lot of heart and soul into their fictional or not band. So there are bands like the Gorillaz, and then there are VTubers, which exist in more the acting sphere. So what about acting? What about playing a character? When you see a Marvel movie, it's easy to separate Chris Hemsworth from Thor, the f***ing Norse god of thunder. At least it should be. Everyone decides to take in fiction a different amount. If you're someone who's obsessed with Thor, then you might be unable to distinguish him from his actor. But actors are not their characters. Thor is not a persona, but a character that was written and given to Chris Hemsworth after he was picked for it. His character is not him, but a fictional construct attached directly to one of the biggest IPs in the world. Thor is a product, and Chris Hemsworth is paid to portray him. So what about Thor being advertised? Barring children, your average person is aware of what an advertisement is, even through a child's rich sense of imagination. They can typically tell the difference between reality and fiction. There are laws that prevent advertisers from targeting children without telling them that they're being advertised to. However, not every advertisement has to tell you. Products not directly for children are fair game. So when do we know we're being advertised to? What exactly constitutes an advertisement? My point is that with access to these characters through social media, we are constantly blurring the line between fiction and reality more and more. Seraphine is a character too, written and worked on by real people with real problems. So I guess the question is, does Seraphine cross that blurred line, and how? Creation for the sake of creation is wonderful, of course, but that's just not the world we live in. Capitalism infects every artistic thought that I have. It makes it hard for me to enjoy what I do and not feel the pressure to monetize my hobbies. It feels gross to me, but at the same time, I have to make money somehow, right? Don't get me wrong. Capitalism ain't it. But what about Seraphine is worse than any other advertised piece of fiction? Any book you purchased, any series streamed that you probably saw an advertisement for? To what degree are we owed content? I'll see if I can come up with a reasonable conclusion. Here's the deal with Seraphine's release skins. She's getting 3, a first since everyone else has only ever gotten 1. It's also a quest skin, which was an exciting concept when Riot first announced it, because it sounds like a skin you might get for free, or pay a reduced price for in exchange for the work that you put in. Instead, it's an ultimate skin, which usually has in-game transformations between its different looks, but in this case has been broken down into 3 separate skins. Instead of making quest skins rewarding, Riot has created a new kind of microtransaction monster. In order to own one, you must pay for them all, and then put excess work in to get the other 2. You pay $30 and then are locked from the other half of your content. Either combine them into one transformative skin like the other ultimates, or reduce the price to make the quests you have to do worth it. Riot execs, please understand why 3 whole-priced release skins is a slap in the face. Historically, Riot Games has pulled stupid cash-grabby moves constantly, disappointing many fans with skin releases for the same 10 characters when some bitches haven't seen the light of day since 2014! They'll release one new character at the cost of 20 older characters. Seraphine's release is a genuine example of that. Most champions are released with one optional cosmetic you can buy, and wait patiently amongst the 150 others to receive their next one. Riot Games has absolutely shown favoritism towards characters who sell well, which is logical. The problem is that Riot has the absolute worst case of confirmation bias. Everyone, including myself, is used to skin lines coming out that either just have a cool theme, but stupid character picks, or the theme is just all over the place. Just saying. Taking High Noon from cowboys just being dudes to angels and demons and robots and swords and gunblade? Is this Final Fantasy? Is your gun a horse? Does that white bitch have a bow? Where are we? The triple release skin announcement was the nail in Seraphine's coffin, but let's dig into what got her into the grave in the first place. Singing somehow erases racism versus the classic she's participating in Crystal Scorpion genocide. We're starting here at Seraphine's lore to get the full context for her motivations and personality. There are absolutely valid criticisms and concerns about her lore, so I feel it's incredibly important to read the damn thing. We begin in A Tale of Two Cities, Piltover and Zaun. The fastest way to explain the cities' relationships is that they're a class metaphor. Piltover is a hub of invention and academia, with Zaun festering underneath it. There's no light, everything's polluted to and the only option for survival is crime. It's the opposite aesthetic poison punk underbelly of Piltover, but these two sides of the same place used to be very separate in their lore. Eventually the one-note Zaun and Piltover characters started to feel stale.
Oh, what's that smell? Oh, it's me. I thought this place could use a little gooping up.
The world building needed to expand. League's world has always been able to expand in such a way that it feels kind of like natural expansion, despite them changing some things later on, usually for the best. Zaun and Piltover's politics started to get interwoven, and more lore continued being released with new champions. Now the two places are written in a much more complex but believable way. Economically, they have a symbiotic relationship. Trade goes through Piltover and some gets filtered into Zaun's black market. Engineering and invention restrictions in Piltover can be ignored in Zaun, and its thriving nightlife provides a fun night out for wealthy Pilties. Zaunites can go up and Pilties can go down. Just because Zaun is a polluted wasteland doesn't mean its inhabitants can't be proud of it. Biggest problem between the two is how different they are. Not because being different is inherently bad, but because Pilties and Zaunites don't understand that. They don't see each other equally. They're divided because neither fully respects the other's differences, their way of living and culture. People from Piltover look at Zaunites like they're insane inbred rat children, which maybe they are, but they should still be treated fairly. The people of Zaun see the people of Piltover as stuffy and rich, which is true, but not for everyone there. It's just generalizing. The people of Zaun can't imagine anyone being authentic in Piltover, and the people of Piltover see Zaunites as sewer rats. They would get along if they just lived a day in the other's shoes, which they kind of highlight in the short story, City of Iron and Glass. A cursory glance at Seraphine's lore, or I don't know, picking up snippets off of Twitter, would definitely lead you to believe that Seraphine is trying to fix racism by singing at people. I'm just here to explore her lore and see how true that is. Also keep in mind that Piltover and Zaun's current relationship is one that mirrors real-life inequality. The lack of respect and understanding that leads to, oh, not that school. It's filled with those kinds of people. Oh! So she's from Piltover because her parents emigrated from Zaun to give her a better life. She's also apparently the ultimate empath, hearing the songs of people's souls. She can't stop listening to these songs, so it drives her kind of insane. Her parents scrape together the last of their money to get her a Hextech crystal shard that helps with her sensory overload. After the crystal finally lowers the volume of the songs in her head, she can hear it singing to her. It turns out that her dampener is a shard of a namestone from a Brackern, an intelligent species of peaceful crystal scorpion. A Brackern's namestone is basically its core of sentience, and very popularly stolen from their sleeping bodies, leaving them in an infinite coma or fucking banished if they even manage to wake up again. The namestones were shipped off to Piltover, where they rebranded them as hex crystals, using them in inventions and as random-ass jewelry. Skarner is a league champion who happens to be the only conscious Brackern Scorpion, because a long time ago, they went into hibernation to wait out war. It's a canon part of his lore that, through the Brackern hive mind, Skarner is able to hear the, and I quote, cries of his people stolen to Piltover. Probably one of the oldest intelligent species in the League universe, the Brackern crystals are passed down from generation to generation. They don't reproduce, the body simply dies and leaves the magic soul crystal behind for another little Brackern. So yeah, Seraphine's accidental participation in the harvesting of another intelligent species is, how do I put it, not epic. But no one gave a shit about it when these characters did it. Seriously, this has been a thing in the lore for years, and no one's cared about the actual exploitation of Skarner's people. Seraphine's possession of one has just brought a spotlight to it. Camille's family literally made their fortune plundering Brackern crystals, but she's still a well-written villain, so I still like her in some way. And it's fine that I do, because she's a fictional character. I know that what makes her interesting is what makes her flawed. Or do we have to stop enjoying fictional villains because they do bad things? Evelyn's a succubus, a demon in-game, and the closest we get to that for her KDA lore is that sometimes her dates disappear.
Well, hello there. Over the last few months, you've proven just how much you adore me. And I assure you, the feeling's mutual. Keep trying on new forms and chasing whatever inspires you, no matter where it leads. You fabulous little creature.
So don't go out of your way to make people feel bad for enjoying an AU. Damn, bitch, read a fanfic and educate yourself. I know how bad Evelyn is. She has a whole song dedicated to it. And bitch, we love it. My girls and gays know exactly where Evelyn belongs.
What's higher than the top? That's me. Come take a look before falling at my feet.
I'm sorry you feel insecure about a strong woman owning herself and her power. Seraphine's story continues with her being able to hear the Brackern within her crystal shard, able to understand its song. The Brackern helps her, singing to her a history of conflict and war from a desert ages in the past. I don't get the feeling that Seraphine would keep the Brackern against their will, especially after they helped her train her empath abilities to be less of a cacophony. If anything, she's the only Hextech user that can actually understand that her crystal is sentient, even though it was confirmed by Riot later that she has no clue that it's a Brackern. So maybe while we thought she knew it was a Brackern, it seemed like she was just using it to her advantage regardless. Given her character, I feel she'd actually work towards being able to return the Brackern to their rightful body. And I wrote that last bit before her lore was changed. Their relationship feels far more symbiotic to me than most of the other Hextech users, even if they have no idea how much pain they're causing these Brackern. There's literally a whole elitist skin line based around the aesthetic and use of the crystals. And by elitist, I mean if you're not lucky, you could be dumping $400+ for one Hextech skin. Skarner and Seraphine are the only ones who can hear the Brackern at the moment, with Skarner able to actually communicate in return. I believe her acquisition of a Brackern crystal to be pretty innocent, remembering that it's not common or even accessible knowledge where they're farmed. Also, she probably can't acquire damn near anything ethically in a place like Piltover. I'm absolutely not excusing who farmed them, selfishly plundering relics from foreign places to fill their own pockets and create a class disparity to rival our own lovely reality, and it's absolutely important to be educated, but it can still be really difficult to sift the truth from lies. You have to put real effort in to make sure that you're properly informed. And what are you supposed to do if that information isn't accessible? This is a fictional universe where the audience can be fully in the know about all of the nuances of political and ethical problems. But what about the characters? They don't share the same dramatic irony that we do. I think a lot about what my opinions would be like, how I would be if the internet wasn't around yet. Seraphine using non-ethically sourced material is absolutely unfortunate, but the level at which she's doing it is no different from you or I. Fast fashion, food's carbon footprint, makeup tested on animals, the gas in your car, the pesticides on your lawn. It's endless. It's impossible to get something that hasn't hurt someone in this day and age. All we can do is be ethically mindful and understanding of those who don't have access to education, or sometimes the education is not even there. At the same time, though, it's your fucking job to be educated and to know what kind of products you're using. There has to be a healthy middle ground, but if the information isn't there, how can you know? People think that Seraphine is just selfishly using her background to become a pop star, but her lore makes it clear very quickly that it's more than that. Knowing that Brackern passed on their namestone crystals to younger Brackerns leads me to believe that Seraphine and her crystal's relationship was written with that in mind. With Seraphine essentially becoming a young, new Brackern, listening to the crystal's wisdom and respecting what they had to say to the point that she could actually turn her life around. She also has only a shard of the whole namestone, which is probably why she can't understand exactly what it is. But the namestone is able to help her grow, to hear the world and listen to its voices in order to understand the deep systemic problems that have come from greed and hatred. And war. That violence begets violence. Her singing, especially as a magical empath, allows her to take everyone's song and harmonize them with hers, making her song a representation of all that she hears. If she can hear and feel their souls, I don't see why her ability shouldn't be extended outwards through her own song, especially with the Hex Tech as an amplifier. Maybe her songs only bring unity for a little while, but they force the listeners to empathize with those that Sarah is empathizing with. Maybe her songs can actually influence some unity, and I'd like to think that the small piece of Brackern that she's got with her is hopeful that this influence might actually change something. It's not about singing away pollution and racism. It's about really showing people the other perspective. It's about pulling the audience outside of themselves, making them understand others, and amplifying the voices of those that need one. To be an actual star for the people. To believe that, even if it's cheesy, she has the ability to provide even momentary respite. I like it. It makes me feel better in a time where I can't. She's a fictional character. If it's written by her creators that she wants to use her music to help people, I can take that at face value. At the very least, I don't have to worry that she has ulterior motives. If she's an innocent on the Brackern front, then I guess the biggest problem with her lore is that she's a pop star that's supposedly trying to help people. So, is she helping people, or is it all talk? I believe, at least in her potential, as a story, she doesn't seem to be heading down a road of greed or selfishness, which, on the other hand, is a near constant in reality, because fame does change people, but it doesn't have to change you if you don't let it, and if a fictional character exists exactly as they're written, then why would it change them? And is Seraphine inserting herself into Zaun's issues without enough perspective? But she has an optimism and sunny outlook on life that could only have come from a moderately comfy childhood with loving parents, coupled with the teenage trauma of her empath abilities overstimulating her to the point of isolation. Her positivity in the face of potential poverty, regardless of living in Piltover, and her trauma, learning to harmonize with the Brackern and traveling to Zaun gives her the strength to want to use her empath abilities. And as cringy as it sounds, she truly wants to become a voice of the people. Considering she can literally hear their true desires, that's a character concept I can buy. Riot Games' handling of the complexities between places like Piltover and Zaun can and should always be criticized. They should always be trying to do better. Especially when it comes as a clear allegory for real life shit we're all experiencing and going through right now. Seraphine's lore isn't perfect, but it's not dog shit either. And her struggle of seeing Piltover, her home, for what it truly is, and struggling to find a voice not just for herself, but for all of those struggling around her, is absolutely understandable and relatable. Eventually, Piltover started to feel less like home. Some think that Seraphine's in-game lore doesn't match her Twitter and KDA persona, specifically the idea that the in-game lore is boring, along with her using Skarner's kin to ascend to stardom and sing away social issues in a place that she doesn't understand. Her motivations in both worlds are to spread hope and understanding, with her magical empathic ability being the catalyst in her in-game lore. Even without that, why wouldn't she be an empath in other settings as well? Her journey on Twitter and through the KDA All-Out comics indicates that it took a little more to figure out why her passion for music was so strong, but she finally realizes that it's the feelings, the unity, the love that music can provide that makes it so magical. Seraphine sings as a vehicle to unite people. She heard the souls of those around her. in the form of song, and so she started singing back as a child. She heard those songs so intensely as she grew that it became a complete sensory overload, leaving her suffering until her parents could scrape together enough money to buy her the shard of a magic crystal, a crystal that characters have been using in the lore for years, most of them completely ignorant to its origins due to systematic cover-ups and lies. If anyone actually thought that Seraphine was a malicious assault against Skarner and his species, they would have brought up the abundant crystal usage amongst the other characters and made a big stink way sooner. 2016 was when it was confirmed that all Hextech crystals were actually Bracker namestones, through Skarner's new short story, Dream Song. Jace's lore has him get a namestone and actually hear something, but the full truth is available only in Skarner's awoken mind, that these are living, suffering things. Camille's family is the closest to it, and even they have not been able to hear the crystal's songs of suffering. Seraphine is in a very unique position to potentially bridge this gap, finally, and she hasn't because it's just the beginning. There's so much room to expand upon her lore now. It's not like the information is available and she isn't bothering to learn. Jace performs experiment after experiment on the namestone in his possession, desperate to understand what it truly is, but unable to hear its song. More than a hive mind, they are one with the earth, the dirt, and the simple creatures that live amongst it. That's why Seraphine's position in Piltover with her crystal seems so deliberate. She's the only soft skin with enough raw empathetic power to understand their song. Her parents gave up everything to get from Zon to Piltover, and used the last of their savings to get her to the one thing that they knew could help her with their disability. Given that she's Chinese coded on her Twitter and in her music, I can see the mirrored struggle of a first-generation kid who doesn't quite fit in with where their parents landed. Her parents being native Zonites is such an integral part of her original lore, from her father singing her Zonite lullabies to her place in Piltover society. And what is it exactly that makes her boring? Character design. She doesn't look like she's from Piltover. She doesn't look like she belongs in League. She looks the same as Sona. Earlier I mentioned that Piltover is innovation central, making it a steampunk paradise. Seraphine was born and raised in Piltover. That shouldn't mean she has to look like everyone else from there. Her parents are Zonites, which absolutely influence their child while being raised in a different culture. Look, I get giving characters a uniform character design to some degree to make them easier to read, but where they live has always been the least relevant part of how they dress or look. Hear me out. Yes, location does influence a lot of the local fashion, and it is important to consider it, but it does not need to define the character. Catch me never looking like a local. That being said, there are little Piltover flares across her more unique outfit. The government worker look is the typical Piltover aesthetic that most people think of, whether inventor or enforcer. Seraphine's parents scraped together what they had to get to Piltover in the first place, and are not in a class that could access Hextech easily. Being average, lower to middle class citizens, it makes sense that she grew up with the typical Piltover aesthetic kind of in the background. Whether you like how Seraphine's outfit is designed or not should be up to preference. And League has never been a typical fantasy world. No fantasy world should have to be a typical fantasy world. I understand there's a certain level of believability that needs to exist in order to try to connect to something. Things that are out of place just ruin everyone's suspension of disbelief. But who's to say what's out of place? If you think something doesn't belong, why? Characters like Zoe have what could be considered a more cartoonish design, which even made me hesitant to how she would fit in when she was finally released. But as I played her and immersed myself in her character and lore, I started to really enjoy her fun-loving, goofy attitude. She's childish, carefree, and a little girly, and I love her for it. I love how she's like an ancient trickster, being of chaos. She's not sexualized at all, thank God, but I feel like that puts her in a different category from the other female champions. It's a category I love because the freedom from a need to make the girl hot allows you to go crazy and create super interesting, diverse women. Zoe's design isn't the greatest thing in the universe, but it's well thought out, and together with her abilities illustrate a believable, silly space child. League's world of Runeterra has become a very diverse cast with all kinds of fantastical magics and technologies. Why wouldn't Seraphine, a young up-and-coming singer, end up as the equivalent of a pop idol? If we as humans enjoy finding personalities we relate to and latching onto them, why wouldn't the people in a fictional world? Your favorite show, your favorite character, your favorite athlete, your favorite band. There's something everyone loves. Something or someone that everyone idolizes. Now more than ever on the internet, people and their creations have the biggest opportunity they've ever had to be seen. Finding new things to idolize is quick, easy, and rewarding, and I don't see us changing that culture anytime soon. With 150 plus champions, it's important that each character is diverse in every way, especially their basic motif. League already has Sona, a mute who plays an instrument modeled off of a Chinese guzheng. They have Jin, the Phantom of the 7th grade opera, and has expanded into musical AUs through skin lines. But they never fully filled the singer niche until now. TikTokers and new creatives have pushed idoldom into overdrive, and it's easier now more than ever. People innately seek out relationships, parasocial or otherwise. I think the more valid criticism of Seraphine's character design is that she has a very similar body type to every other League woman. Slim, long legs, perfect proportions? Anyways, you know the type. The kind of feminine body design where you could draw one body and play League girl dress up on it without being able to tell the differences from their original designs. Character design is all about shapes, about strong silhouettes, and easily recognizable characteristics that push the vibe the creator's trying to get across with that character. The character designers at Riot are not stupid and know how important a silhouette is for the form of a character design, especially when created with the intention of implementing it into a video game with a third-person bird's eye view. You often don't get a very good look at the champions while you're actually playing the game. And zooming in on yourself to admire whatever cosmetic you just spent 20 smackers on usually guarantees death. The problem is them relying on props as a crutch for their weak female character designs. Seraphine being a perfect current example, with her in-game stage prop being implemented mostly to give her overall design a distinctive look from the other 150 playable champions. It does a great job, which I confirm by playing her. She doesn't feel like any of the other characters that exist already in the game either. As many claims as there were that she was very similar to Sona in the beginning. Visibility and clear designs are important in a game with you and 9 other people all making a bunch of stupid monkey brain snap decisions for 45 minutes. The stage is not really the problem. The problem, again, is that Seraphine, whose body type even makes sense based off of a rising pop idol, is being released on the heels of sucker punch after sucker punch of new characters that look exactly like someone who already exists in the game, or new skins for the same group of twinks! Anytime Riot has dipped their toes in what they don't realize is the fountain of youth, that is monster design, that monster is either a guy, or Riot shoves the feminine creature into the stinky, toxic pits of Zaun, where they get nerfed into the ground and then left skinless for years! The game is balanced for pro play because it makes money, as opposed to the hundreds of thousands of players that just want to play this alien shark that happens to be a beautiful queen and purchase a cosmetic for her that makes her into a dubstep robot or a sentient ice gargoyle or a silly little shark. Listen, I'm sorry. I can't talk about how Seraphine's design is relevant and what it means unless I give you the context under which it's coming out. People are pissed and have been pissed for a while about Riot's money-grabbing tendencies, throwing this blonde bitch a bone every time someone whispers about a new skin line coming out. As a free game, Riot's certainly gone through many stages since League's release 11 years ago. It's at an all-time high, bringing in bank even throughout the pandemic as they continued releasing content at an unprecedented rate. Maybe a little too fast. The more that's added to the game, the more glaring and unfixed errors stand out, visual, gameplay, or otherwise. The game is becoming unhealthier on every level. I hope that the mechanic changes and forced character design analyses that are coming from the season change and Wild Rift's release breathe fresh air into the original game. While not all of it is 100% quality, there are a lot of things to love about it. The character designers, the writers, every kind of artist, 2D and 3D, put so much creativity and love into what they do, and even if it's all for capitalism, I have always found inspiration in the art that Riot's amazing employees have pushed harder and harder to perfect, and the world that the writers and designers have built. I've loved this stupid thing for so long that I've watched multiple people go from fan artists on social media still learning and growing to hired Riot employees. Some of the cosmetics they've ended up making are my favorite in the game. The company is not perfect. Those at the top who get to say that a body type doesn't sell are the ones who deserve the most critique. They've been exposed as harboring awful workplace conditions too. It's unfortunately pretty typical office shit. They've said they'll do better. Just know that we're watching. Pointing out Riot's place in society right now and remembering how much growth still needs to happen is important, but that's not what this video is about. It's about how that misogynistic, not so diverse workplace environment bullshit affects their product. So yeah, Seraphine is a typical girl. She's a typical League girl. Is that a good thing? Not necessarily. Does it make sense for her? Yeah. Could League do better and go back to when they released a bunch of amazing POC characters and monsters and let them be strong and playable and give them a skin? And I miss the era of Jinx, whose release music video ensured that she would be a character to remember. That bitch put League on the map by the end of 2013, and 2014 and 2015 were marked as a golden age in Riot's character design. Taking past inspirations and pushing them to the limit, we were given Callista, Rek'Sai, Bard, Kindred, Alawi, Talia, Camille. Is it any coincidence that most of these characters very rarely get any attention? Body diversity starts to drop off with Xayah, who has an amazing character design, but her slim frame and button nose mark a notable return to Riot's early female character design. Xayah's look was similar enough to the average that she never seems to be exactly on model, if you know what I mean. Kind of infuriating for a skin to give a character bigger bobbies when their canon design is a fucking A-cup, especially when that A-cup is an important physical distinction from a slew of other character designs. Then Zoe was released, her most defining feature that she's a child. People were becoming more and more split over new character releases, better and better reasons to critique popping up with each new release. By the time we got to Lilia, a cute deer centaur that can't quite be passed off as a monster girl, people were tired of the rapid new champion releases. Lilia's human parts were too human, feeling a little boring for some people, and looking a little too much like Nico. But it seemed to me like the valid criticisms of the female champions were getting too mixed in with unnecessary anger and hatred. I don't know anything. I wrote a lot of this over a week ago, thinking about criticisms I've had myself and seen reflected in others. But it all recently resurfaced in the midst of me hyperfixating on this video. Seraphine may be gone from Twitter by now, but that doesn't mean the discourse has left me alone. With League or any other audience, fandom, follower, there is unfortunately always a vocal section of people who live in a world that revolves around themselves. I don't know how to explain to you that you need to respect other people that aren't exactly the same as you. Maybe I'm in the minority, especially for a notoriously toxic fan base, but the game has done a lot for me. And there are real people that I know that I can relate to on a deep personal level working behind the scenes to make this world feel so magical. I don't really give a shit if I'm the minority. All the more reason to talk about the bullshit that this brings. Call me an e-girl, call me whatever you want. I'm just a rando who happens to care about the direction of future media. Especially when one of the top grossing games in the world has one of the most notoriously unempathetic fan bases. Criticism is important, yes, but we have to make sure that it doesn't go too far and that it's directed in the right direction. The people who made a cosmetic in a way that you didn't like don't deserve death threats, let alone the character animators who barely make enough to pay LA rent. With projects of this size, there are so many interlocking parts, so many interacting co-workers, each a human with hopes and dreams and aspirations and feelings and people that care about them. Delivering an opinion is something that should be handled with tact and consideration for the other party. Unless you want to insult them. Criticism easily crosses the line of just being plain rude if it isn't constructive. And if you want to insult them, why? Is it justified? You can say your piece and leave without making someone else feel like shit. In some cases, it's important to roast someone alive, like if they're openly racist. But think hard about that line that you cross when you decide to threaten someone's safety. Threaten their life. Would you say it to their face? Twitter is a perfect example of this strange intersection of business and casual that many people have not figured out how to navigate yet, enabling a level of lazy bullying that comes with easy anonymity and zero consequences. Unsatisfied fans should not be going feral on the first unsuspecting, barely relevant party they come across, especially against a monolith like Riot Games. If someone has to hear it, it should be whoever made that call, and I think that the first step should absolutely be constructive criticism and not fucking death threats. What I'm trying to say is that second chances are important, and getting a chance to explain yourself is important. And not judging things based on biases is important. We could use more positivity on social media, more positivity everywhere. I just want to be able to celebrate the good while criticizing the genuinely bad. Which brings us back to everyone's favorite idol. I mentioned Seraphine is heavily Chinese coded, from the design of her eyes and overall face to her posts and songs in English and Mandarin. 2 out of 4 of her song participations include it.
味道，感觉犹如海浪的味道，不断往前，Oh you never way down. This is how I do it every day. Wow, wow. 这一路上的奇迹都记住了你的每一个瞬间，无比的耀眼。I know you want some more， 准备好就一起走 ，Keeping it up。让你进入这深层的世界，每一秒唯有你能感觉。
But characters looking whiter than their original design has been a common theme throughout Riot's history. The discourse that has arisen recently over Nidalee's blatant whitewashing is not only frustrating to watch, but hard to deal with. She is being whitewashed. Tanning is one thing. I guarantee that someone who isn't white all over will never be this specific shade of sickly see-through white. Don't create an indigenous coded character unless you're going to be consistent or at the very least not offensive. Nidalee's race-bending tendencies aren't even the beginning. Her base design sucks. It's sexy for the sake of being sexy and not at all interesting to look at. It's from 2009 and yet still doesn't get the excuse of just being from that era. The original design looks more like an offensive stereotype than anything. And even then, her voice lines and dance just make me want to bang my head against a wall.
The taste of coward will prey on the civilized. I'll show these house cats real claws. Did I mention it's mating season? Here, mousey, mousey, mousey.
If you design a character with a dark skin tone, don't make it white. Just don't! Nidalee's Snow Bunny skin should still feature her original skin tone because it's still her. You can change your hair, you can put contacts in, you can wear all kinds of outfits, but skin tone is something that's so integral to someone's character because it affects the way that you're perceived. You can't change your skin or your race, so why should characters we're supposed to be able to relate to? Much like me relating to strong female characters because they understand my struggles. They have lived some of the same story as me, and I'd like to hear it. Representation in fiction is so incredibly necessary because you can't escape to something you can't relate to. If most games have no black people, how is a black person supposed to be able to suspend their disbelief enough to even have fun with them? I absolutely was in a privileged enough position as a kid to never have to question how much I related to most characters until I got older, which is when I learned a lot more about the world and also learned critical thinking. Most characters looked similar enough to me that I related to them without having to think twice. But eventually I started to notice the lack of female characters that existed as more than a sex object. Or all the fictional women I'd grown to love as a stupid, innocent child being used solely to progress some man's character development. For the first time, I truly understood what it meant to feel different. To become exhausted sifting through the media that may have otherwise been enjoyable. To feel that I wasn't welcome. Representation is important because it allows people to actually connect with the work of fiction and the characters that drive it. In doing so, the characters are grounded and end up being far more believable than the millionth size extra small at Forever 21. If you don't think representation matters, it's because you've been catered to so thoroughly that you're spoiled. Why be empathetic and understanding to those that are different from you, am I right? Everyone deserves to feel included. Everyone deserves to feel welcome. So why should only one type of person have that right? The worst part is that this industry standard of refusing to diversify characters has created an environment that validates people that think minorities don't belong in gaming. You only think that way because you've never had an introspective thought in your life. And don't give me that shit about actual races not existing in fantasy or that politics shouldn't be involved in games. First off, fiction is based on reality. And it's written by real people. So it makes no sense for anyone to be surprised at political intrigue being a core catalyst in many game narratives, or any media for that matter. Not having to think about politics is a really privileged place to be. Besides, gender and race are not political. They're just categorizations that those afraid of change have clung to and forced upon others as a way to compensate for their lack of emotional intelligence. Fiction also affects reality, so it's important that if your game includes something that has a lot of complexity and nuance, you address the politics of it. Ignoring those complexities makes the characters feel ignorant and the world flat. At least show how the way the world works affects your characters. The deeper the history, the smarter the world building, the better fantasy you've created. White people exist in fiction. Fantasy races exist in fiction, so why shouldn't race be a part of it? It already is. You literally can't just not include it unless you write a story about animals. But then you have different species, which would have the same implications as race if they were sentient. Come on, we've seen Zootopia. So either just admit you're racist or start learning how to write from different perspectives. Diversify your characters. Whitewashing coupled with the interchangeable butts and busts, and there you have it. Inconsistent character design. It's definitely hard to keep characters on model. It's something those in the 2D animation industry have to work at rigorously to ensure that a character doesn't look so different it's jarring. Messing up occasionally is only human, but when it's this consistent at such a professional level, where each piece of art goes through so many layers of critiques and alterations, gets seen by so many trained eyes, it really feels like making the femme character look as hot as she possibly can is more important than making her look like her. Paired with the fact that the best designed out-of-the-box characters get absolutely no attention from the company after they're released, it's no wonder that fans are fed up. We wait 3 whole years for a skin that turns out to be a giant stinker while the golden children are shoved into any thematic they can possibly be crammed in. Sometimes, though, you get lucky and get to wait 4 years between skins. Literally, look at the examples I'm pulling these from. Ivern's design is great from his gameplay to his look, but that greatness is too niche for marketing, apparently. Especially when they just slap a random crap skin on him and are confused when his core fans don't want it, let alone a new demographic. It's understandable that Riot wants to make money, but when it's so obvious from the way the game is balanced for the few hundred people that play it professionally to the way they pump out skins for a set group of people, of course fans would be pissed. And Seraphine is merely the breaking point. She has no personality. She's cringe. The mental health trap. If you have a problem, unless you rectify it in some way, it will absolutely keep eating at you. It will fester and rot until the inevitable confrontation happens, blowing things further out of proportion. The longer it goes on, the more people are involved. Do you see where I'm going with this? Everyone's involved in Seraphine, whether to hate or to stan. I've been trying to be as objective as possible about the criticisms, but I have to make it clear. The hate went too far. It seemed like everyone had something to say about Seraphine. I believe that the most valid criticism is that she possibly used mental health to sell a product. First, I should probably explain where all the hate for her Twitter really came from. Some of the distaste for Seraphine stemmed from her design. Fair enough, it was the first we'd seen of her. Already discussed the ups and downs of that, but as time went on and her Twitter gained more traction, a common theme seemed to crop up throughout the posts. Many of them were what I'd categorize as relatable content. Posts talking about Seraphine's anxiety and mental health circulated even beyond the general League community, and everyone had an opinion. But people were already tired of her personality, saying it was boring, and once her voice lines were released, saying she was a bitch. As the posts in general continued, people felt tired of seeing Seraphine, and the critiques of Seraphine, and the Seraphine hate, and the Seraphine stans, constantly. Twitter was absolutely oversaturated with Seraphine, but mostly oversaturated with opinions about her. I don't understand what's so boring about Seraphine's character or personality. Why she apparently doesn't have one. As opposed to the other League characters, she's more optimistic, very feminine, and kind of young. She has an entire Twitter's worth of original content and retweets. She released 3 song covers, one of Popstar's, Childhood Dreams, and All the Things She Said. The last song she released, Made Me This Way, was an original. While I followed her, she reminded me a lot of myself and the other people that I've chosen to follow, retweeting art that I'd like, from users that I followed, and cultivating a feeling of a soft girl, for better or for worse. She absolutely has a personality and has had one since the beginning. It's not boring either. It's just normal. Her desires are lofty but childish, and her attitude sweet and placating. Every post, retweet, and piece of art was just one more piece of that ever-expanding puzzle that was Seraphine. Don't say she's boring just because you don't like that kind of character. Seraphine can be happy and cheerful and soft just because. But she has motivation for becoming the good person that I believe her to be. She loved singing as a child. It was only as she grew older and her abilities became stronger that she experienced any musical trauma. I don't think she needs a reason to be a pop star. If she likes singing and has her abilities under control, then hell, being famous sounds good to anyone. But yeah, we want more of a relatable and believable character motivation. As much as we shit on brands for their obvious relatable content, it's an even bigger problem if the content is not relatable at all. It's about finding a believable balance. I feel like Seraphine actually has that, though. Just because her KDA skin is an alternate universe to her in-game lore does not mean that all of the effort into developing a character, a vibe, if you will, shouldn't translate back to her original personality. It's not just a fanfiction. This AU was designed with the original character in mind by those that created her. In both worlds, she loves singing, and in both worlds, she's a genuinely nice, empathetic person. Somehow, through music, she always discovers her voice, and through finding her voice, she can give those she listens to one. It's a fantasy that anyone with an ounce of empathy can probably understand. To be able to actually do something about all of the pain and suffering in the world. To actually make a change when you're used to feeling so powerless. Seraphine, especially in her original lore, has been through hell with what is essentially a disability. Taking in the voices of others was not something she chose, and even though it drove her to rock bottom during her formative years, she still chose to listen to the wisdom of the Brackern and learn, likely changing her entire worldview and enabling her to embrace her uniqueness. She becomes a pop star through sheer empathetic power, like Vanya's violin or any character with musical empathic projection. It's not explicitly stated that she's shooting out empathy waves at them, but the subtext is clear enough. Whether her listeners are magically affected or not, she's able to hear what her listeners want, so she should be able to create songs they'd be willing to hear. I can believe that she understands human emotion thoroughly from constantly indulging in it. It's just that her expressing that very human pain and suffering has to come from a place of authenticity and vulnerable honesty. These are the mental health posts that rub a lot of people the wrong way. It felt like Riot might be using the concept of anxiety and depression to sell Seraphine, especially after the announcement of her controversial cosmetic. What does it mean to use mental health for marketing, though? Twitter account may be bait on Riot's money-grabbing hook, but why do we have to take the bite? Like I said though, the mental health criticisms are the most valid out there about Seraphine in my opinion. I've been thinking about this the most, and I've been thinking it over for a while because I think that there's a lot to it. Seraphine being connected to an intellectual property inherently means she's connected to a product. However, the first product she's connected to isn't her skin, but League of Legends. You can't even do anything with the skin if you have no semblance of what League is or how to play it. I can almost guarantee you no one who wasn't already somewhat aware of League just saw Seraphine's marketing, made an account, and bought the skin. League of Legends itself is free to play, and I've been playing Seraphine completely for free since she was released. The only thing I'd even be able to spend money on would be the cosmetic. There was an occasion that Seraphine's Twitter asked her followers for encouraging words because she was going to Shanghai in 2 days to join KDA and perform at Worlds. This was supposed to connect to her appearing at the 2020 World Championships, but to many it came off as weird. After all, she's not real, so interacting with her Twitter and trying to make a fictional character feel better has rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Whoever was behind the Twitter then took the words of encouragement from people that had decided to offer them and printed them out, putting them on a corkboard. Anyone who already felt weird about a fictional character asking for words of encouragement for a fictional event felt that they had their fears confirmed with this second post. Seraphine's Twitter is a fictional story, but it interacts with reality so much that it can be hard to remember that it's not the real Seraphine manning the account, but whoever is representing her. It does seem to possibly cross a line by having a fictional character interact with people who might think she's real. Because she was released with an exceptionally expensive skin, the posts about her having anxiety and wanting words of encouragement can come off as a pure marketing strategy. There were posts about how lucky she was to be joining KDA, or how appreciative she was to her fans, or how she couldn't believe it was the last day of her day job because she was moving on to bigger and better things. Due to the nature of her existence and her attachment to a product, it all just rang hollow for some people. How lucky to be becoming a pop star during a raging pandemic. How lucky to not even exist and have so many adoring fans who are wishing you the best. Using mental health to sell a product is not great. When Seraphine's Twitter comes in, especially because it leads to a strange relationship between audience and fictional character. Parasocial relationship is what develops between a fan and their idol. It's a kind of relationship where the fan feels like the two are friends, despite the idol not knowing them. These kinds of relationships have been skyrocketing with famous actors, musicians, and other content creators' increased presence on social media. On Twitter, you can reply directly to someone's tweet. Sometimes you can even DM them. Never before have those stars in such faraway places been so reachable. A lot of people don't know how to maintain boundaries because of it. There are those that can acknowledge the distance between them and their idol, the divide between fiction and reality, respectfully. Then there are some that cannot distinguish close friendship from a parasocial relationship, and forget that their hero will be shocked to see some rando show up at their home. These kinds of relationships have a higher chance of being risky because one party only knows an idea of the other, and the notoriety does not help. But the majority of fans can respect that person enough to remember that their relationship is a separated one. Seraphine's requests for empathy, expressions of doubt, and mental illness take the already inevitable parasocial relationships and deepen them. When you're open and vulnerable, people are able to care about you more because they can understand your character. It's important to be loved. Good writers know this and make all characters, including antagonists, well-rounded and relatable. I believe Seraphine's character was going to go there regardless of her Twitter, regardless of whether people could respond. She's written as a trauma-ridden, anxious creative who's optimistic but has a hard time believing in herself. Of course she'd experience imposter syndrome, and any authentic influencer would be honest about how they felt. But you can't make something authentic. It either is or it isn't. Anyone caught on the more influential side of a parasocial relationship is likely connected to a product. Actors promote their movies, artists promote their art, musicians promote their music, etc. When everything is a product, knowing how to spot the most obvious influencing is the best way to protect you and your wallet. Following too deep into a company's trap will leave you traveling cross-country to go to a combination Disney theme park COVID hotspot. It's good to indulge yourself occasionally, but knowing what's too far will ground you and keep you making rational decisions. It's not really on us, though, as the consumer to constantly defend ourselves. It's good to be smart, but companies need to be watched for predatory marketing techniques. Exploitation is promising something and not following through. Using the things that mean a lot to people solely for profit is passionless and evil, yet it's so common. Mental health is absolutely something that gets exploited. Corinna Kopf, an influencer from David Dobrik's Vlog Squad, made low-effort anxiety merch. She just slapped the first Google result on some shirts and called it a day. Not even an actual design. Regardless of her donating 15% of the proceeds, it's low-effort, bad taste merch that does more harm than good. There's something weird about selling mental illness on a shirt. Trendy fast fashion? Brands pull this crap all the time. During any BLM or health awareness events, they use the subject to draw more attention to and promote their brand. Companies slapping on a black square to support BLM. Amazon having the most money in the worst working conditions. Susan G. Komen, you know, the breast cancer charity, suing any other charity that uses the pink ribbon, lining execs' pockets with donation money. Autism Speaks, not representing autistic people at all, claiming that they have a disease that needs to be cured, which is false. Autistic people just have brains that work a little bit differently. It's all about learning how to interact and talk to your friends, having a healthy communication, right? Why should it be different with anyone else? It's really hard to figure out how to even feel about Seraphine's mental health posts and the claims that they're exploitative because of her $25 skin. I don't want to diminish those claims because I don't think they're necessarily wrong, but I really don't know where the line is here. When I saw those posts, I truly felt a nice sense of positivity, of relatability. I know that's what those posts are designed to do, but when everything is marketing and every time you purchase something you've been advertised, you're just buying into it, and League is a free game, and I've been playing Seraphine for free, and got to see all the content on her Twitter for free, and got to listen to 4 of her songs for free, and saw a naive optimistic like no other from League of Legends, which is just so charming to me because my reality is utter fucking misery. And I only get to feel at ease when I see this soft pink bitch sing an indie song. Does that make any sense? I absolutely think Riot can take some of the criticism and learn from it. They have a lot of growing to do still. But Seraphine was a piece of a much larger project to put a free game on phones and consoles, put out free music and art, and experiment with character writing on new platforms. As someone who just loves fiction in every form, I was so excited when I was one of the first few hundred people to actually even follow her. I loved her hair, her design was a little basic, but I could see what they were trying to do with it and was excited to see what was coming. There were whispers of KDA returning, whose first single popped off and provided me with enough creative inspiration to destroy a steroid-filled kangaroo. It's all just art that they're providing for free, whether you like it or not. There's a product attached, yes, but there's so much free content to be had With the game and Seraphine herself, that one big Seraphine skin and 4 normal KDA all-out skins, after the amount of content we've gotten recently, it's acceptable to me. But are the mental health posts acceptable? I still don't want to just say yes because I don't want to invalidate anyone that possibly did feel exploited by Seraphine's Twitter posts. But I really don't think it was as bad as people made it out to be. Those posts were fun and interactive, and I knew there were real people behind it the whole time. I had no reason to think that this didn't come from a place of true love and passion because I'm so familiar with so many artists at Riot. I knew that a lot of concept and expertise went into her creation and her life on Twitter. With the way that the photographic-based art from Seraphine's profile is made, I can tell that in the midst of this pandemic, this was a project they could all work on from home and put a lot of personality and fun into. And they did, I really thought so, and I think there were a lot of people that enjoyed her as well. But it really just felt like a lot of the hate was around well before the post where Seraphine admitted she was feeling nervous and could use some words of encouragement. I can believe her because she's a fictional character. Through everyone being kind to Seraphine and listening to how she spoke about herself and her emotions, she created spaces on Twitter that were pure celebratory kindness. Towards a fictional character, maybe, but it felt kind of uniting and sincere at first because everyone just wanted to root for this girl. It was a little light of hope in a non-self-deprecating vulnerability on the cesspool that is Twitter. It was just a super fun way to interact with the story, especially when I knew there was more coming that I was excited for. I love KDA. I loved their first video, and I ended up liking their new stuff too. If you don't, that's fine, but it should be fine that I like it too. I appreciate the art that has been provided completely for free, and I don't have the money right now to buy the skins, so I'm not going to. But honestly, all it would do would inject serotonin right into my brain, so I can't complain that they released those either. The mental illnesses that Seraphine alludes to are all too relatable. Even if it's branded, it's at least a character that has real effort and lore, regardless of my opinion being the minority. You can't deny that the characterization and work is there. The problem may very well be the parasocial relationship that developed for me and other Seraphine fans, because she's a fictional character. A fictional character who is claiming on a social media platform to have anxiety. On paper, it does sound not great, especially tied to a product. But why should fiction be so limited their creators can't use one of the biggest mediums that will ever exist to play with their creations and expand upon the current capabilities of fantasy writing? Social media is just how things are gonna be now. Individual creators and brands alike have been using role-playing accounts to represent characters and kins for years. Riot Games attempted to find a soft middle ground between your classic Tumblr anime role-playing blog and Baby Nut. Not including vulnerabilities and flaws in your characters will leave them completely one-dimensional. Leaving out Seraphine's believable insecurities about becoming famous and forever thrust into the public eye would have made her personality boring and cardboard. Adding those kinds of flaws, the yearning of her childhood dreams, the anxiety about her life changing, it's all so real, and because of the nature of Seraphine's existence, I can believe its authenticity. She's not the brand talking, she is just the middleman, just like every sponsored actor, influencer, or content creator that you happen to enjoy. Here's what I think. I think that most of the hate being directed towards Seraphine is a direct result of Riot's past transgressions and its audience's tendency to shit on women, fictional or otherwise. Maybe Riot's been creating sex objects for so long that characters for people like me are inconceivable for some. What's really wrong with Zoe being a goofy kid? What's really wrong with Seraphine being an anxious but optimistic singer? And don't give me that shit about disliking a character because of their specific fan base. If there are ever annoying Zoe stans on Twitter, whatever. If you think her abilities are broken, whatever. But when you take that aggravation out on external factors like the character itself, especially without addressing where it's really coming from, it shows a hatred for women, POC, and gays that turns the criticism into hate. I don't really think Seraphine's mental health post would have been taken so poorly if the loudest didn't already say she was cringy in the first place. Not to mention that people really want to defend kids, especially with the mental health posts, but participating in cringe culture hurts children. Children are another group of people that are hurt from cringe culture because they can't explore and be themselves. They're pushing themselves into a box already because they know that there's certain ways to be that are not accepted. Not to mention that Seraphine being lumped in with cringe culture is even more indicative of an attitude that deems feminine traits like kindness, optimism, and vulnerability as bad because they're feminine. Women are held up to impossible standards. You have to be perfectly sexy, but not too sexy. But if you're not trying to be sexy at all, what are you trying to do? What use do you have? But the truth is that no one has to be useful to deserve basic human respect and empathy. And no one should have to earn it just because they don't fit the mold. People should be allowed to like things without being harassed. People should also be allowed to dislike things without being harassed. And it should go without saying that liking or not liking something doesn't automatically give you a consequence-free pass to being an asshole to the other side. There are extremists everywhere. You can either let the loudest voices give you a place to put your blame or educate yourself and help educate those around you. Just be introspective. Why don't you like this thing? Are you yelling just to yell, or did you do ample research first? Seraphine's mental health posts are at least a gray area in my opinion. I can't help but imagine Seraphine's sole author happily printing out the praise that their creation had received and making a beautiful piece of art, ecstatic to share it and continue upon her lore and character. With all of the amazing detailed art and naive, soft, but strong optimism, I can't help but be charmed by Seraphine. I think her in-game lore is relatable to the extreme, especially as someone who now knows how truly bad the place I was raised is. I feel like it's brave to be positive and kind, especially considering what that did to Seraphine's reputation. I am someone who suffers from what Seraphine suffers from, and then some. I lost my job at the beginning of the pandemic, just like a lot of other people. So I guess I should be pissed about Seraphine having the privilege of leaving hers. But I'm not. I'm happy for her doing what it takes in overcoming her insecurities and traumas, and I'm perfectly happy to say that to her Twitter. I was fascinated to watch a story unfold using Twitter as a medium. Some indie creators have already done it, but the level of notoriety here allowed for a huge, fun community, at least for a little while. Putting this video out will be a massive toll on my own mental health. The process of writing it, the inability to let it go, the doubts that I've had, but I really, really feel that it's important for me to tell everyone how I feel about what's happened with Seraphine. I feel like I've just had to sit in the background and watch the same top-level mistakes validate those who don't think that women in POC deserve the same fucking representation as everyone else. Because once we have it, we're inevitably made to feel bad about it. I'm saying all of this because I need you to understand why Seraphine has meant so much to me. Why it's been so hard to watch her get endlessly shit on by a hate bandwagon. The mental health posts helped me. Seraphine was written as a character that was able to be vulnerable and break the facade even while posting basic Instagram captioning photos to Twitter. Knowing the layers of work and painting that went into each picture though, and finally that one woman was dedicated to writing Seraphine's Twitter, made me really understand that the mental health post had a depth that was hard to see while standing in the shallows. I believe that Twitter should not be barred as a medium to explore fiction, but we should also begin to understand the blurring line between fiction and reality. Parasocial relationships are always going to exist, and they're always going to have the potential to entice people into buying something eventually, but we shouldn't just ignore the hours and hours of professional level free content and art that has gone into making League, influencers, and content creators alike what they are today. While Sarah's launch was not perfect, and Riot can and should take the critiques, her character itself just isn't as bad as it was made out to be. You don't have to like her. Damn, you can even dislike her personality. Maybe it's just not for you. But ask yourself if it's because she's made for girls and gays and not you. Critique, then chill. You gonna stare? Okay. Why is she getting this attention over my favorite champion? They have had a dedicated group working on Seraphine's Twitter as a project since it dropped in June. She featured in KDA's More at the end of October, which was at least at the level of funding that Popstars was, and that was an insane hit. Riot has a dedicated music department now that is around simply to create these big musical collaborations, featuring legitimate-ass artists like Jara Burns, Madison Beer, Soyeon, Kiki Palmer, and Thutmose. Abso Facto and Jasmine Clark worked with this department to make some pretty damn good covers under Seraphine's name. The cover started with pop stars and had a very indie sound, establishing what Seraphine was supposed to be emulating.
Bringing us down. We go high till we get
following two covers were of Ari's childhood dreams,
I remember all my childhood dreams. I find it hard to get them out of my mind.
and tattoos All the Things She Said.
All the things she said, all the things she said, running through my head, running through my head, running through my head. All the things she said, all the things she said, running through my head, running through my head. All the things she said. This is not enough.
And included new vocals and instrumentals. The last song was actually an original called Made Me This Way.
Tell me things I don't deserve, but the mirror shows a different face, and I've grown to look the other way, telling myself it's only the start. Baby, look what you've done. You made me this way.
With Abso Facto and Jasmine Clark working on each song with the music team, it was absolutely no small feat. It makes sense that tons and tons of money was spent and tons of effort and passion was poured into this project by the composers, the writers, the artists, the dancers, the animators, the concept designers. I love these videos and the art that they provide because I can see the human stories behind them. Fiction can be so wonderful because it can be so intricate. Seraphine is not just Seraphine. She's receiving so much attention from the company because she's part of a much bigger era in Riot's history. For 11 years, League of Legends has been a 100% free-to-play game. It's provided me with countless hours of content and fun, especially with the ability to hang out with 4 of my other friends. Again, it's not perfect, and many times the game has filled me with enough rage and raw anger to blast me off into space, but I can't deny the hours and hours of content it's given me, not only through its gameplay, but its world building and its art. Fans have forever poked fun at Riot Games for their namesake, reminding them that League of Legends was the only game that Riot Games had even had. Traditionally, Riot's income came solely through skins sales and esports, and now the esports scene is so huge that it's become more the focus for the company than anything else, which is why it's so exciting to see them releasing new games finally, expanding upon the League universe of Runeterra through a board game, a card game, console and mobile expansion, and at last a role-playing game. League of Legends has been available only on PC for years. It's a gigantic deal that one of the biggest games in the esports market is now spreading its reach across the entire gaming market. It's a little scary in terms of capitalism, but League is still free, and Legends of Runeterra is free, and I feel that the cost of the upcoming games will be well worth it. But Riot couldn't do any of this if not for characters like Seraphine, who they knew would do well. Which is ironic, considering she ended up being the biggest controversy since the last person who got cancelled en masse. Listen, I get it. I'm a Lux main, and I'm actually mad she gets so many skins. It's too much. But optional cosmetics are optional cosmetics, and at the end of the day, I appreciate the constant, consistent increase in volume and quality of skins. That many options may overwhelm some, but it allows all kinds of people to find the skins that fit them. Which is why I agree that it's sad when a champion gets utterly cucked by whichever exec said no to Ivern getting a Coven skin even though someone in the skin team clearly already drew it. Seraphine getting this much attention is actually bad for her, as we've seen. Unfortunately, Riot didn't change their mind with the Quest skin before releasing her, but inevitably it means that some actual fans of her, like me, can't afford to buy it. Like I said earlier, I've been playing her completely for free since she came out a few weeks ago. I'd honestly love to have the 3 skins, which are technically an ultimate pack, but I acknowledge how annoying it is that I would be perfectly okay with just having one of them right now, and I can't. League of Legends already has the most shit loot box system in the entire world, and because of the amount of content, it's near guaranteed you won't ever get a skin you actually like. Half the time when I've saved up all the stuff required to open a loot box, I get a champion shard, which gives you a champion, which is useless because I own all of them. I think people are a little bit right to be pissed at this triple skin, and by now I've explained why. It's also hard because I also believe that each individual skin is good and actually makes the bundle worth what it's priced at. The problem is it's just too much too soon for the community. For a character they unfortunately hated, it's also just unfortunate that they even bothered to entice us with the concept of quest skins, only for them to be just as expensive as every other skin, but harder to acquire. It's not really fun, it's not really cute, it's just annoying. Skins are expensive and you've only made us realize that they'll continue to get hard to get. I get that this is also coming off of the heels of me saying that League is a free game and they need skins to profit, but I think both of these thoughts can and should coexist, or else there's a disconnect between what Riot is giving us and what we actually want. Seraphine was what we wanted, for the people she was made for anyways. Again though, she's getting all of this attention immediately after all of these questionable skin decisions. The loot box system sucks, and quest skins would have been possibly a way to get skins that didn't cost money. But now we're at a big turning point in Riot Games and League, and I understand why people don't see the potential in the skins going forward. It usually feels like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I think that all that can really happen now is that Riot hopefully hears our criticisms and continues to make their workplace and product both better and better. The employees are the heart and soul of the company, and it would do Riot and its audience well to acknowledge that instead of limiting their creativity. Game devs are people too! Which leads me to my next point. While I was writing this, something kind of resulted from all of the Sarah hate. @step_knee on Twitter released a statement claiming she believes Seraphine might have been based off of her. Basically, she dated a male rioter for a bit, and he would tell her that they were basing a character off of her. They didn't date for long, but a year or so later, Seraphine came out. I don't think she thought much of it at first, but after so much negative attention, she began to believe that random rioters' claims and thought maybe Seraphine really could be based off of her. Riot has released a statement saying that the character is not based off of her, but all they did was investigate themselves. One of the lead character designers has come forward to say that his wife, Riot Whiskies, who I've been following for a while, is the inspiration for Seraphine. But that doesn't mean something of Stephanie's couldn't have been slipped in there. I'm not gonna say whether this actually did or didn't happen. Stephanie has a lawyer and there might be a legal battle, but I am going to talk about what I think is possible. Based on her statement and looking at the pictures, it's impossible for anyone to actually say for certain whether Riot did or didn't use Stephanie as a base for Seraphine. I don't think she's lying, though. The picture comparisons show generalized everyday poses of an average girl on both ends. Stephanie and Seraphine's art are really also just kind of average again, not really similar. Seraphine's doodles in particular match her author's profile pic, drawn by popular League fan artist Suckling. The names could be seen as similar, but they kind of just both start with an S. She has some pictures with a cat and pink hair. It's not quite enough to go off of, but the reason she even had this idea implanted into her head was because she was associated with Riot Games. Stephanie Doris met John on a trip to LA at the end of college and spoke to him casually for the next few months. They played League together and would talk about the game, and he'd often tell her how he planned to make characters and skins based off of her. It was weird, and Stephanie asked many times for him to stop, but the threats were already made. And that's what they are. Threats. Or on one specific occasion, an awkward Ari skin based on her. It's weird. I really do think that this confirmed ex-Riot employee is the root of this problem. I don't know now or if we'll ever know the truth if Riot was aware of the ownership of Stephanie's ideas or not, especially after John told her he distributed an essay she had written about Piltover and Zon, one that was well written and reflects some of the notions I've already spoken about in this video. Specifically the complexities between Piltover, Zon, and the rest of the League universe, bringing up some points about where the world building could go. It's totally possible that this guy, who wasn't even on the design team while at Riot, could have pushed some ideas through the grapevine. Perhaps some listened, perhaps they didn't. These are also ideas that a dedicated team of writers have likely already considered and could have been developing already. It's really not something I can say yes or no on definitively. But what I do feel I should comment on is John's position in all of this. If John really was constantly telling Doris that he was going to model a League character off of her, take her work, spread it, then it's no wonder that she's upset with Seraphine's release. It's no wonder that she feels that fear that this might be based off of her image. Seraphine gets shit on mostly just for being a cringy girl, so it's hard for me to not feel almost personally attacked about it myself, let alone having a legitimate connection to Riot and fear that this character could be you. John used his leverage with the company to essentially threaten to steal her image, regardless of her asking him not to, simply because she was a manic pixie dream girl in his eyes. He thought by pushing her further and further onto a pedestal that he'd somehow earn her favor. And regardless of her liking it or not, just by John threatening Stephanie to use her image and base something off of her, her agency has been taken away from her. And I understand how that feels. Schrodinger's douchebag over here may or may not have done shit to steal her image, but by taking away her agency and placing those fears within her, this John has only contributed to what people who like Seraphine and who are like Seraphine are currently experiencing. It's his fault for placing those fears within her in the first place. Can y'all stop manipulating women so that you can sleep with them? Doris unfortunately was pushed to this point because of Seraphine's infamy. The discourse over her went far beyond what it needed to, and everyone started to get involved. It spread to the point that people who didn't know anything about League were talking about her. It's been interesting to watch as someone on an inside minority, but it's been sad, too, to see people like me being constantly mocked and called cringe just because of shit like pink hair, cutesy hobbies, or even liking pumpkin spice lattes. Doris said, "It does suck to see your features torn apart on a massive scale every time you open your Twitter feed. I've been feeling the same way, stuck doom scrolling and feeling miserable, unable to escape something that has made me feel so alone. If I have pink hair, I must be an e-girl, but I need to be hot for me to matter. But if I'm too hot, if I start an OnlyFans, I'm a slut. If I like pumpkin spice lattes, I'm basic. If I'm not thin, I'm fat. And if I'm fat, then I know I'm not getting any respect." It's all the same kind of idea. Just let me be the way that I want and be cheesy and childish and cringy if I want to. I can't change the way that I look, and frankly, Sharkface, you can't either. Learn to find reasons to enjoy people instead of reasons to hate them. So what's the point? These are the kind of microaggressions that allow people to be underhandedly sexist and racist constantly. I'm making a big deal out of Seraphine because I firsthand know how much it hurts to feel like whether I embrace my femininity or not, I will always be seen a certain way because of my physical appearance, or voice, or attitude. I know what it's like to open up about your feelings just to be made to feel bad for experiencing them. Seraphine's Brackern Crystal means hopefully good things for them. People who don't care much about Skarner or his kind and have been shitting on Seraphine regardless are the point. Seraphine's mental health post may have been damaging for some people, and it's not my place to say, but I feel it's possible that it helped even more. They helped me. The people who were calling Seraphine cringy and doubled down on that when they saw people enjoying those posts are the point. Stephanie Doris being unable to enjoy an innately sweet character because of what she was made out to be in the fanon is the point. Hosting fictional characters on Twitter does blur the line between reality and fiction. Like I've said, I suppose it can be dangerous if those interacting with Seraphine don't know that she's fictional, but all of the pictures of her were clearly photos and art combined, and as soon as we knew she was a product, we knew she was fictional. She started posting in June, and because her identity as a League character was figured out so quickly via Reddit, some people even think it was leaked. So people who didn't care for her character grew tired of her, especially hearing about her, creating an Ouroboros of complaining that I had to be exposed to every f***ing day on Twitter. Almost every other fandom is the same way. You don't always have to be right. Critique, then chill. After everything, we finally got to meet Seraphine's author, Bethany Higa. She was the sole author for Seraphine's Twitter. I feel as though a single female Riot employee writing for Seraphine makes her that much more authentic. Even with an obvious product connected to the end of Seraphine's journey, it was a journey that I felt had earned that product. A journey that was mostly just icing on League's 11-year anniversary as a free game. Bethany Higa's personality absolutely shined through on Seraphine's Twitter, and it made total sense to me as someone who had been following Seraphine when Higa was finally sourced in articles about Sarah. Because she's an actual person with actual emotions and feelings and depth. Someone who lives in the same era as us and is trying to write from her own experiences. The authenticity of it is so clear to me. It makes me sad that the post ended up possibly fooling some people, but it felt more like the uninformed commentary around the post was informing opinions more than the offense people took to the post themselves. Higa even came out as bisexual as Seraphine's Twitter was ending, and it reminds me of when the author of Love, Simon, Becky Albertalli, received a ton of criticism for being a straight person telling queer stories. Eventually she was forced to come out as bisexual to validate her stance as a queer storyteller. But to what degree are we owed that information? She was forced to. Why do we expect people to bare their souls to the public to earn the right to tell their stories? I want to thank Bethany Higa personally for attempting to do both with Seraphine, making a character that I found incredibly understandable and traumatized even more relatable. I'm sorry about all the hate. I'm sorry for every person that may have seen the hate for Seraphine and felt all too relatable, feeling like you'd never be truly seen for who you are. The skin feels meaningless in the grand scheme of things, because without League being as free and accessible as it's always been, I would never have made such irreplaceable friendships. I don't know what to think in the end, but I wish Seraphine and girls like her could be celebrated just for being themselves, instead of being expected to exist in some appealing box. If there are things to be criticized, learn to have a conversation about it. Make sure you know what you're talking about. Hate usually only hurts those who aren't guilty, and we need to make sure to listen and not assume guilt immediately. Well, that kind of wraps up all of Seraphine so far, I guess. Hopefully. I've been fixating on this since the hate began, but at least with this video I can explain how I feel. If you don't agree, that's fine, but I encourage you to at least do some introspection on why. Well, I'll be living, laughing, and mostly screaming until my next video, so subscribe or I'll be posting only Callista fan cams from here on out. See ya!